Welcome, everyone. It's Adam Caplan and Andrew DiCecco. We're inside the birds. We're in the Jacksonville week. Andrew and I will take you through a lot today on this Friday preview show. We'll get into the injuries. Andrew was at practice this week in the heat late in the week. He was in the locker room. We're going to get into his thoughts on this latest run of the Eagles are having. How real is it? I want to hear what he's got to say. We'll get through the injury updates, and there are a lot of them for both teams. And also, Andrew was in the locker room this week. He also talked to Will Shipley, who's gotten to know a little bit. And Will had an interesting game last week, which we're going to get into. And Andrew, love having you here, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, great to be with you, and look forward to kind of diving into this week. There's been a lot that's going on.
Yeah. So let's get to I know you're at Wednesday and Thursday's practices. So we had a couple pop-up injuries. Landon Dickerson, that's new with the knee injury. Jalen Carter, it's the second time he's been listed this season with a shoulder, so that was kind of surprising. But we'll update the injuries in a second. But let's just talk about practice. You were there on Wednesday and Thursday. I know reporters get like roughly about 20 minutes. Anything interesting in those 2 days that you saw?
Well, Wednesday was interesting because Landon Dickerson was standing off to the side, and in his place at left guard on Wednesday was Tyler Steen. So that was something that was a little bit unexpected. I wasn't expecting to see Darius Slay, wasn't expecting to see Dallas Goedert, just based on the way things had been trending. But I thought it was a little surprising not to see Jalen Carter out there. And later on, we found out that it was due to the shoulder injury. Fast forward today, or on Thursday, he was back out there. So all things look to be good for that. But we saw some tackling drills that we got to see. Saw some ball security drills where they kind of go through the car wash. They're kind of everybody lines up and they run through this sort of obstacle course where they're either getting hit by Jamal Singleton, the running backs coach. He kind of runs it, and that was pretty much Wednesday. The tackling drill, the ball security, and then I watched a lot of the offensive linemen kind of go through their combo blocks and things like that.
Yeah, so that drill you were talking about with Jamal Singleton, they ran that in training camp. We were able to see that. So that's good that they're getting that done. Now, we had a great question for a Patreon live stream on Wednesday, and this is for you. They had asked you, they wanted to ask you this question, but since you weren't there, I want to ask you this question. Part of what's interesting is how they've gotten this older coaching staff, not super old, but they've gotten older. They also went back to pro coach instead of all these college guys. You've been in the locker room, you're around the team, the offseason OTAs, training camp, and so forth, obviously during the season. Anything you picked up about sort of how things were different? Because from being there last year, I know you had said it, they seem to have this negative vibe going on.
Mm-hmm.
They're 5-2. Now we could debate whether it's the schedule, how good the roster is. Guys are just getting better, improving, whatever the case may be. But let's talk about the locker room. What's kind of like the vibe around the locker room comparatively to last year?
This is a close-knit group. This is a very close-knit group. And one thing I noticed, whether it's the wide receivers kind of, bantering back and forth and they're sitting there and they're all engaged, or it's the linebackers at the back corner of the locker room and they're kind of all talking, passing on advice. They're doing things outside of the locker room and, outside of the building, which I think is good for building chemistry. You see a lot of the offensive linemen. Like, it just seems like everyone really enjoys being there together. And one thing that I was able to really glean is that it's a stark contrast from last season for sure. It seems like everyone really there's a cohesive vibe there, and I think that's contributing a lot to what you're seeing on the field. It's translating.
All right, well, so let's get to that. The improvement. Now, again, you look at the Bengals. They're an under 500 team, but clearly underachieving. They're probably better than the record, but the record says what they are now. They're 3-5 after losing to the Eagles. The bad Browns because of Deshaun Watson, who's now out for the season due to the torn Achilles. The Giants are obviously a bad football team, but again, those are wins. They're on their schedule. That's who they have to play. These games matter because this isn't baseball. You only get 17 of these things. So what do you see? Why is this team improved so suddenly?
I think a lot of it has to do with patience. That was something that I talked about from spring through the summer, that this was not going to be an instantaneous, solution. They weren't going to hit the ground running week one. It wasn't likely, just given the newness, offensive coordinator, new center, new right guard, new defensive coordinator, and different moving parts on the defense as well. Naturally, it takes time and it takes reps as a unit to really be able to gel. And especially on offense, where Jalen Hurts has had so many different voices in his ear over the years, you almost have to filter out, what you've been taught. You have to unlearn a lot of the different things. Maybe Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier want his mechanics to be a certain way, but previous coaches wanted a different way. And I think for him, he's sort of fixating on what Kellen Moore wants. And now, and also for Kellen Moore, Adam, he has to adjust to Jalen Hurts. What is Jalen like? Well, how can he best accentuate what he does well? So it takes a while to kind of navigate that. And I think right now what you're seeing is a team that's sort of rounding into form. And I really think after the 2 month mark, you should have an idea of what a team is. And I think we're starting to see that.
Defensively is really where we've seen the improvement. And like all of a sudden, it kind of started in the New Orleans game. Yes, Tampa, they regressed in the heat. It was awful. But really, since then, they steadily have gotten better. What are your thoughts on A, the improvement, where it's come from, and B, what did you see in training camp that would give you hope that it could be like this?
Well, I was a little bit more optimistic about the defense because I saw a lot of the young talent. You see that they were much faster and more athletic, especially on the back end. And knowing that they had Vic Fangio there, I just was of the belief that they were going to get it together. He knows exactly what he's looking for. He knows what kind of personnel he's looking for, and he knows exactly how it's supposed to look like. So they have run variations of his system before, but they have the architect now, so that should give them a baseline level of production, I would think. And for someone like a Zach Bond, I think that really speaks to what Vic saw in him, knowing that he could fit into a system as an inside linebacker or an ILB, as he calls them.
Mhm.
Kobe Dean has had a tremendous season, I think. After getting off to a little bit of a slow start, he still is a little bit susceptible in coverage, but he's been really effective attacking downhill, has shown signs of improvement in coverage. That second level to me has been the glue of the defense because last season you didn't get any sort of adequate play from the linebacker situation. And it all starts up front with Jalen Carter. The defense goes as Jalen Carter goes. And I think you're seeing a lot more good than not from Jalen. And he's able to occupy double teams. He's physical at attacking and resetting the line of scrimmage. And it frees up a lot of teammates to make plays. And I think to kind of sum it all up, the biggest benefactor of that defense has been inserting Cooper DeJean at nickel. And it just seems like that was like the final piece
Oh,
for everything to sort of work in concert.
he to me, Andrew, look, Maddox in his heyday was a pretty good nickel corner, one of the better ones. But this is not a slight at Devontae. Devontae can't do these kind of things that DeJean is doing. DeJean's a bigger athlete. He's got better versatility. I mean, he's made an impact. And for if you haven't seen it yet, folks, the Inside the Tape show that we dropped with Greg Cosell and Jeff and I, we broke down Cooper's tape. Not only did we do Hurts, we had a great the bomb from Hurts, which is an awesome throw. It's Devontae Smith. We broke that play down, but we broke down DeJean, right? We showed you kind of what he is, some of the special plays that he's made. And Andrew, because we just didn't see him much in training camp. I'm a little surprised. I mean, I know it's only 3 games, but to be this good this soon is amazing to me.
On offense, you mean?
And the Cooper, I'm just talking about Cooper DeJean.
Cooper, yeah, Cooper DeJean. I think that his ability, you look at that play, that fourth down stop, when he never took his eyes off the motion, man. A lot of young players can get fooled and by the deception and the eye candy. And I think for him to be able to do that at such a young age, his third NFL start, it speaks to his football acumen and his instincts. And he is such a great open field tackler. So to me, I just think that this is a player that I'm actually surprised that it took them this long to get him on the field. But there's an obvious ascension there at the defense when he's back there and since he's been implemented. And I think the sky's the limit. It's so critical for the Eagles now to get Cooper and Quinyon Mitchell reps together. These are going to be two critical pieces for the Eagles' future. And I think right now you're seeing how much more athletic and upside the secondary has with him and Quinyon.
It's interesting because they drafted him thinking that he'd be an outside corner, but quite frankly, he's so good and dynamic in this nickel role and the way that they use him, moving him around and so forth. It's only 3 games, so we have to be careful.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to see the rest of the season. If he continues to climb and make plays, I mean, why would you take him out of this role? Again, it's only been a handful of games, so we need to go longer here. But again, training camp, because he was come back for the hamstring injury. I don't know that we saw anything like this, or did you see anything at training camp would give you the idea that this could happen?
No, I mean, going back to the spring, and again, it's non-padded and it's a practice in May, but you saw his instincts and his ability to close on the football and read things pretty fast. But when you miss 3 weeks of training camp and you're behind the 8 ball, and you saw he looked a little rusty against the Vikings in that final preseason game, you really didn't know what to expect. But I think They got him. They got the startup cost out of the way. They picked a great spot to put him in against the Cleveland Browns, against a hapless offense and a quarterback in Deshaun Watson, who at that time didn't have a ton of confidence. To get Cooper in there, he played 91% of the snaps, I believe, in his NFL first NFL start. Got his feet wet, and I think he continues to get better each and every week. Smart player, very high IQ player, and that's one thing that really jumps out when I watch his tape.
All right, another player I want to talk to you about because I know you've gotten to know Ben Van Sumeren a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got this fullback role. First of all, did they do this in training camp? Did you see it? This fullback role that he's doing?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So I did not see the fullback role, but what I will say is on the final training camp practice that was open to the media, Adam, Nick Sirianni called a 5-play competitive period. So he would call 2 players out at random. I remember one of them was Nolan Smith versus Darian Kennard in a pass rush drill. Nolan Smith won that one. I think Ty Davis Price was another one in a pass blocking drill. He won that one. The first one was Quinyon Mitchell. He called for A.J. Brown. Quinyon lost that matchup. A.J. won down the sideline. And then the final one was they called for Ben Van Sumeren, and he called for safety Andre Sam, 2 defensive players. So a little odd there, but they had Van Sumeren line up as if he was a receiver and run a route against Andre Sam. Now we know that it was to get a better look about how he was going to fare, but he ran he got a great release. He hit him with a swing move and a head fake, and he ran this really nice corner route. And unfortunately for Ben, Kenny Pickett was the quarterback, and he sailed the pass, and Ben lunged and dove for it, couldn't get it. But you saw the speed and the athleticism, and Ben was a very prolific high school wide receiver at Garber High School. So he kind of tapped into his youth there. And it kind of, it kind of prompted the question, is he tight end 3 or 4? Like, how did the Eagles view him? Because you see his athleticism. So that's kind of where it all started, at least in my estimation.
Interesting stuff. Very good stuff. All right, let's get to the injuries. So Eagles offense, Dallas Goedert, he's missed 8 straight practices. We're not expecting him to play. As we know, they've got this little combo going here. Grant Calcaterra, I know you talked about it many times on our show, how far he's come. And Jack Stoll, who's back. What's funny, Andrew, is he thought he was going to be the Giants' wide tight end, but Chris Manhertz had something to do with that, with that not happening. So Jack now is back with the Eagles as their backup their number 2 tight end in terms of
had
just
a really
blocking.
had a really nice block on that Devontae Smith touchdown, Bob.
Incredible. It seemed like he blocked him for an hour.
Yeah, and that's the type of stuff, Adam, that obviously doesn't show up on the box score.
Sure.
But that was a full team win, and I think Jack does a really good job in that area.
So we'll have the same combo again. Now, Alberto, tell me something. So he's clearly ready to go, but
yeah,
do they need another tight end? What are your thoughts on Alberto right now?
I talked to Alberto on Friday, actually, and just to kind of catch up with him and see how he was progressing. The first week was more of a ramp up. Last week he said he was full speed. He felt great. And it was an injury that happened. It was an abdomen injury, but he said that it happened early on. He didn't really know what it was, so he tried to power through it. And it wasn't really until that first preseason game he said that was the last time that he could actually run. And then they found out, they got the diagnosis, and they realized he was going to have to have surgery. So he said it was a pretty lengthy type of rehab process, and he had to really deal with scar tissue breakup and things like that. But he said he feels good. He stayed engaged by working with tight ends coach Jason Michael and getting those mental reps. The Eagles like him, and I just don't know where there's going to be room to activate him. He had his 21-day window open on October 16th. So, I mean, the window's starting to narrow a little bit. I don't know how exactly he fits in. And let's not forget, Britton Covey's going to be he's on the mend. He'll be coming back soon as well. He missed his first game that he missed was the Bucks game, so he has to be close as well.
All right, so on Covey, what are your thoughts on Covey versus DeJean for the punt returner? Because Cooper's been surprisingly really good. I know he was good in college, but
Really
he's really looked good. He's physical, and Covey's one of the top 3 punt returners, if not the best in the NFL. So, what are your thoughts on who should do that?
And by the way, Covey on Wednesday and Thursday was working independently on a side field with a trainer, doing sort of agility type drills and things like that. So, to answer your question, Adam, I think that it behooves the Eagles to get Covey back involved, the punt returner, and limit the wear and tear on Cooper DeJean, because now you're seeing how instrumental he is to the Eagles defense and the success of the defense. So I think maybe exposing him to some of those unnecessary hits on punt return, where it's a really violent. I mean, you really can't do much to protect yourself if you're trying to worry about fielding a punt. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to being able to protect yourself. I think that it kind of warrants some sort of concern over that with Cooper. I think eventually you're going to want to see Britton Covey back there. I'm not sure Anaya Smith would get the tap on the shoulder for that yet. I don't know if he's quite ready for that in a game situation when there's so much riding on it. But I will say that Anais also looks a lot more comfortable returning punts,
Hmm.
and just he's playing a lot faster as well. But I think Covey, when he does return, he will be the punt returner, and that's probably the right move.
It's funny. Before Covey, boy, the Eagles struggled for punt returners for years, and now they're really good at it. It's interesting how that works out. So we'll see what happens when Covey's back. In fact, don't forget he had a slot role. See, here's another question for you. Dotson clearly is just not a factor. Okay, we know he can play inside or outside, but he's not a
Mm-hmm.
factor. Covey was a factor.
Yeah,
I think one of the games he had early on, I think he had 6 receptions, not for a lot of
yeah.
yards. But what are your thoughts
Jalen,
on?
Jalen,
Go ahead.
yeah, Jalen really trusts him. Jalen really trusts Britton Covey, and that's something that's very evident. And and I think you saw that his willingness in the Atlanta game to really, I don't want to say force feed him, but he looked to him often because he's always where he needs to be, sure-handed, and that was you saw a lot of that in training camp. They had a connection there. It's because he runs really good routes, but he's always where he needs to be. And I think for a quarterback, when you're trying to outside of AJ and Devontae, you're trying to figure out who your next option is going to be. It's always going to be somebody who's dependable, and that's why Covey's got a lot of looks. That's why Grant Calcaterra is getting a lot of looks right now. I think when Covey does return, Adam, to answer your question, he will be involved at wide receiver.
So that Atlanta game, as you mentioned, that was the game I was talking about. He had 6 receptions, caught all 6 targets. He just adds something because they need to get that ball, the short area where they're not getting a lot of production.
Right.
Get it to Covey, who's got great short area quickness. You know that you saw him in OTAs and training camp. So that would add something to this offense. There's no question about it. Other injuries. So we just talked about Becton. You gave that nugget about how Steen took the reps on Wednesday.
Left guard
Left guard.
for
How about? Did you
Dickerson.
see
Yeah.
that in training camp at all?
No, no. Tyler, I think, was exclusively working at right guard. But and I'll also add this. I believe, and I know the sample size has been minimal, but I'm of the belief that Tyler Steen has been a better player at right guard than Mekhi Becton.
Yeah, Greg said that. Cosell said that he had
It
heard.
was it was
Yeah,
very apparent to me, especially on second watch of the Bengals game, that
yeah.
they have something there with Tyler Steen. He moves really well. He's playing with a lot more confidence. That's a testament to not only Tyler Steen but also Jeff Stoutland for helping him get ready over the past year.
Although Becton's a great story, to be honest with you, it's like Steen. His first start wasn't good. Like last year, these two times he plays have really been good. Mackay's come a long way here to learn how to play guard
Oh
like
yeah,
on the spot. I mean that's
he's looked
crazy,
he's looked
right?
really good. He's looked really good also. So it's a good problem to have if you're the
Yep.
Eagles. But I think for Tyler Steen, the last time a lot of folks really saw him prior to the season was that Dallas game where he looked overmatched. So to see where he's come from then till now, this is a guy who was in the running for the starting job, didn't work out in his favor. He didn't sulk, he didn't pout. He worked harder and he found a way to make sure that he made his next opportunity count. So obviously he's going to be their future there. It's just a matter of when.
Let's go to defense. We mentioned earlier Jalen Carter returned to practice on Thursday. He's expected to go, barring a setback. Darius Slay. Okay, we need to talk about this. This is fascinating. So, unless Slay does something today, he won't play. He needs to get on the field. Oldest starting corner in the National Football League. So, look, if Father Time catches up to all of us, it's tough. Groin injuries when you're older, it's a tough deal. So Isaiah Rodgers would be that guy. Let's talk about it. Isaiah Rodgers. Nice story. You saw him in training camp.
Yeah.
You see him in this season. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I've gotten to know Isaiah a little bit this season. He's a player who is very grateful for the opportunity to play here in Philadelphia. He doesn't take any snap for granted, and I think you really see that manifest on the field when he does get his opportunities. He's always looking to make a play. He's very good short area quickness, advanced eye discipline for him. I believe he doesn't have the size that you're looking for from an outside corner, but he really makes up for it with his anticipation and reactive skills. That pass breakup that he had, that the tip drill to CJ Gardner Johnson
Mm,
really, I think,
great play.
accents his ability to make plays on the football. He's always looking to do that. Slay, I actually saw Slay Thursday in the locker room.
Yeah.
I mean, he just passing through, but not practicing Wednesday or Thursday. We'll have to see what Friday holds.
Yep.
It doesn't look particularly good, but I don't know that you really want to press him into service if you don't have to against a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Well, and also it's a long season, and you're trying to go as far as you can. You need this guy there. He's a veteran. He's still a good player, by the way. He's not the
He's
same
played
guy he
well.
was.
He's played well.
Yeah, he's done a good job. Yeah, no question about it. We'll talk about the Jaguar injuries in a second, but I got to talk to you about Thursday's practice. You've been to a lot of practices.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to guess, is this the warmest or one of the warmest, or was it one of the warmest in-season practices you've been to?
Oh, by far, easily. I looked around. I was like, wait a minute, this is October 31st, right? This isn't August 6th. Like it was a scorcher out there. It kind of snuck up on you. Earlier in the day, it was nice weather, and then midday, Adam, that's where the heat really ramped up. It's the kind of weather that you wonder if there's going to be cramping because it's such a drastic departure from what we've seen over the past couple of weeks. But yeah, I guess it was a welcome addition for a lot of the Eagles players that don't have to deal with the cold weather. It kind of extends that good fall weather.
So it's interesting on Thursday, right? So, I always look at the forecast, particularly if I know I'm going to be going out somewhere. So I usually play tennis on Thursdays, and I went to stretch zone, as I always do every Thursday before I play, to get stretched, get my hamstrings done, my calves done, and my shoulders done, and my quads. Quads are usually Thursday. It's the most challenging stretch that I get. Anyway, by the way, if you want to sign up, folks, go to stretchzone.com and get your free stretch. But anyway, so I start playing tennis, and you were talking about the middle of the afternoon. Half an hour in, where I'm at a clinic, which I do every Thursday, and I've never tapped out because I'm feeling great physically. I felt great because I'm nice and loose because I got stretched. I'm like, this is crazy. It was mid 80s. The heat index was over 90. So here's my question. Did you notice anyone? Well, you guys only get like 20 minutes, but
Yeah.
We saw this in because you see this in training camp sometimes when guys are holding their hips. Did you notice anything with the heat for the short time you guys got a chance to watch?
No, nothing really. Nah, nothing really. But it makes you wonder when you see a day like that sort of comes out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and it's so drastic like that. You almost wonder how someone's going to be able to acclimate to that in such a short period of time. But there was nothing I was really able to glean from the time that I was there.
All right. So the Friday practice, by the way, by the mid 70s. Game time on Sunday at 4:05 Eastern. 60 degrees, very little wind, so it's going to be great football weather. Boy, this is it. Before we move on here, I got to ask you one question.
Yeah.
Because some people are concerned about the next game's Dallas week. Is this going to be a letdown? I know Doug Peterson's coming into Philly, and they're a bad football team. Do you see a letdown at all possible here?
Yeah, that's something I've heard quite a bit this week, Adam. Is this going to be a trap game? I don't believe that it will, because when you look at what the Eagles have been able to do over the 3-game winning streak, it would have been so easy for them to get distracted coming off that Browns game for a multitude of reasons. They never deviated their focus. They took it to the Giants. They took it to the Bengals. I really do think that they're building upon that. So I wouldn't expect them to overlook a team. Yes, the Jaguars are 2-6. Yes, they're very depleted at wide receiver. They don't have much going in the way of offensive production. Their defense isn't really anything to write home about aside from Trayvon Walker, who has 6.5 sacks. But I don't think that the Eagles are wired to look past an opponent. And I think that stems from the locker room, the accountability and the connection, but it also the leadership of Jalen Hurts, Brandon Graham, Jordan Mailata, and Saquon Barkley. Players like that won't allow that to happen.
All right, Andrew, hold those thoughts. Let's hear a word from our friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
Hey, before you guys move on, Adam and Andrew, I know how much you love going to live sporting events, Sixers games, Flyers games, Phillies games, and I know you both love concerts as well. There's nothing like seeing live sports and live shows. It is a absolute thrilling experience, and the best experience you can get is using Game Time and their new feature called Game Time Picks. The Game Time app makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier because Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Listen, there's a lot of great games. There's college football, there's Penn State games, there's Temple, right? There's Eagles games that people are going to want to get tickets for. And of course, the Sixers and Flyers have all started up. A lot of great sporting events at home, and of course, some great concerts coming to Philly and Atlantic City as well. So you have to take advantage of the super deals on Game Time. It shows you the best value for where you're sitting in the arena. And there are other great tiers of deals as well. It is such an easy experience using the Game Time app. We tell you that you are covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. That includes event cancellation, job loss protection. I love the fact that you can see the view from your seat before you buy it just using the app right there. So get all in using the Game Time app and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code BIRDS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code BIRDS, BIRDS, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
All right, Andrew, let's get to the Jaguar injuries, and there are a lot of them. Now, they've got some good news late this week. So Travis Etienne, he's trending towards getting cleared to play after missing 2 games due to a hamstring injury, which he suffered, I believe, against the Patriots a few weeks ago in London. Tank Bigsby has an ankle injury. They expect him to play. Etienne, man, is not, look, he looked pretty good, especially last year, had a bunch of rushing touchdowns, but this season, not so good. What are your thoughts on the running game?
Yeah, Tank Bigsby's been a nice story for them. 400 plus rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, I believe. He's a powerful runner, so I think that if he's able to go, like you said, he's somebody that the Eagles are going to have to be on their A game and wrapping up, making sure that if he gets through that first level, that they're wrapping up and they're taking proper angles to the football because he can break tackles. But offensively, Adam, I think the key to their success, if they're able to get anything going for the Jaguars, is going to be tight end Evan Ingram in the middle of the field. I would expect them to target Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean in coverage and maybe test the Evan Ingram up the seam. But outside of that, they really don't have a ton of weaponry that are really going to pose as a threat to the Eagles defense, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, look at Mike Gesicki crushed the Eagles last week. I mean, he's an athlete. Mike Gesicki could always run. He's just more of a finesse player, but he had a huge game. Let's get to the receivers. So Gabe Davis, they do expect him to play. He's got this recurring shoulder problem. He was very limited last week, but they expect him to play. Brian Thomas, they think will be able to play. He's got a chest contusion. He's worked some this week. They want to see how he gets through Friday's practice. Christian Kirk's done for the year with a broken collarbone, left collarbone. He had surgery already. All right, so the guy who's going to fill in is a Penn State or Parker Washington. Did you see him at all play at Penn State?
Yeah, I saw him a little bit. I saw him more as a rotational type of player. I think that if he has to go and play significant snaps, I don't view him as a player that, I mean, look, you have to account for every player out there, but
Sure.
I don't view him as a volume type of guy that's going to hurt you. But the Eagles are going to have to they're going to have to be mindful of all the players that are out there. But I never really got the sense that he's going to be somebody that's going to be a long-term fixture in an offense.
Yeah, he'll fill that slot role for Kirk, and he also is handling kickoff and punt returns for Devin Duvernay, who's on injury reserve. So they did have the big lineup change. They traded Cam Robinson, their left tackle. They clearly didn't want. He was on the final year of his deal. They'll pick up some of his salary. And Walker Little, who's in the final year of his rookie deal,
Stanford, right?
What's that?
I think he went to Stanford.
Correct.
Walker.
Yeah, he's a big dude. He's a mauler, physical guy. He's going to play left tackle. And he started at right and left tackle for them. He's played a little bit of guard, but he's definitely going to be the starter the rest of the season at left guard. So we'll see, at left tackle. So we'll see how that works out for them against the Eagles front. And defensively, Ronald Darby, barring a setback, will be in the starting lineup. Former Eagle Ronald Darby, now in his 30s, Andrew. We all remember him 7 years ago as a Super Bowl winner with the Eagles.
Yeah, he's a player that the Eagles should be able to feast on. I mean, he does have the quickness still. He's a very fast player, but he's also somebody that isn't very technically savvy. He doesn't play with great fundamentals. That's a player that I would expect the Eagles to target early and often.
How do you see this game now? So we know the weather's not going to be a factor. We just went over the injuries for both teams. Eagles, they've dealt with the absence of Goddard pretty well. Grant Calcaterra, let's talk about him first, and a couple more notes before we get to your rookie diary and your locker room notes. But let's talk about Grant Calcaterra. Let's go back to OTAs and training camp. What did you see from him then?
He looked great in the spring. He caught everything. He was working the seams, and it seemed to me that he had a budding rapport with Jalen Hurts. Okay, that's the spring. It's one thing to do it in a non-padded practice in May. It's entirely different to do it in training camp. That's really, I guess you call that the minor leagues training camp, and then the regular seasons when you get to the majors. But when the pads came on, Grant Calcaterra was still a factor. So it seemed that he had turned the corner, and Jalen Hurts was still looking his way, which is, it sounds simple enough, Adam, but when there's options out there on the field that Jalen doesn't have a ton of reps with, at least historically, he's a little bit hesitant to get them involved. So the fact that he was looking his way and trusting him in the tight window situations, I think that really speaks to the trust that he has and the confidence he has in Calcaterra. He's going to give you everything he can as a blocker. That's an area that he's still working on. He's a willing blocker. He's just not particularly great at it. But if you listen to Nick Sirianni the other day on Wednesday when he spoke, he says he has a picture of Grant Calcaterra in his office from when he was launching himself into a defensive end on a Saquon Barkley touchdown run against the Saints. So I think that he acknowledged that he is willing and he is gritty. So I think he's sort of becoming, it's taken a few seasons now, a much more well-rounded player than when he arrived as a rookie in 22 out of SMU.
Yeah, he's been a good story because coming back from the concussion stuff, the semi-retirement, and you just weren't sure the first couple of years because he's just not a good enough blocker. But we knew he's an athlete; he just need to be more consistent. But I thought you nailed the point there. He got the confidence at the quarterback. Clearly, they've got a trust level now that's building. That's going to help them. They'll get Covey back. They'll get Goddard back. Now you've got Calcaterra involved. They're past target group. This is actually, when you really look at it. And Jahan Dotson, I know they don't really use him, but this is a pretty diverse and deep group, don't you think?
I do. I think that Covey is an interesting player in how he fits into the equation because he offers a different skill set than any of the players that are there. He can help you with the motion. You can get him the ball in space. You can give him those screen passes and allow him to take his short area quickness and upfield and burst to get upfield and pick up some yards. So, and Dotson will have to see because Dotson, the light hasn't come on yet. We'll see if it does. But they do have a very diverse group. Johnny Wilson's a player who we haven't even mentioned, but he does a really good job in the blocking game, and he's really taken on a special teams role, which is kind of new to him. So, oh, and by the way, I don't know if you saw that unscripted on that Nick Sirianni and the Eagles put out, but Nick Sirianni saying something in a meeting room where he said, "Sometimes you, sometimes me, always us." And he mentioned, in passing in his press conference that saying came from a shirt that he saw on Johnny Wilson. I asked Johnny Wilson about that in the locker room and the origins of that. He goes, "Oh yeah, I was scrolling Instagram. I saw this T-shirt that it was a company that was in a collaboration with Nike, and it had that saying on it. And I thought, what a cool shirt. Wanted to grab that and add it because he said that he always believes in that, playing a team sport. And Nick Sirianni always preaches, you can't be great without the greatness of others. So he thought that was an interesting tie-in."
Yeah, that's. I heard him talk about that during his press conference, and now I know exactly what he was talking about. All right, let's get to your rookie diary with Will Shipley. You had what? Did you have Eli Ricks last year, right?
Yeah, Eli.
Okay, so let's talk about Shipley. Also, you were in the locker room all week, really last 2 weeks since we've talked. So give us some stuff that you learned over the last 2 weeks.
Well, some of the injury things, I talked to Albert O to get an update on him. I like to talk to Van Sumeren very often. Will Shipley I spoke to on Thursday. Get this, the touchdown that wasn't to be, that 17-yarder right up the middle. He said that he wasn't even expecting to go in because it was due to a shoe malfunction to Kenny Gainwell that they said, "Ship, get in there." Kenny's shoe fell off or whatever it was, and he had to get in there. And he said the number one thing on his mind was protect the football at all costs. And he said that it parted like the Red Sea. He gets it. He goes, when I was at the 5-yard line, he goes, nobody was going to tackle me. He's like, it would have taken God to tackle me on that play. And then, of course, it didn't happen. But he said, you know what? It doesn't matter because the 6 points wouldn't have mattered because we already had the game at hand. He goes, I was just happy to have the opportunity, and it was more so a byproduct of the hard work that he's put in. So I think that was a cool way to look at it. We talk a lot about food. He's really big into food and restaurants around Philadelphia. So I share some of mine with him. He tells me some that I haven't even heard of.
Yeah. Who does he like?
Well, yeah. So he was talking about he went to John's Roast Pork, and he sent me. There's like a whole list that he has. Him and his fiance have like 50 restaurants on there, and
Wow.
some of which like Italian places, Mexican places, like all kinds of great stuff. And I just
Pizza? And by any chance?
pizza. I told him I told him Thursday about Tacanelli's,
Tacanelli's. Yep. Yep.
and I told him about Pizza Bedia in
Oh,
Fishtown.
I've never been there. I am dying to
Incredible.
go. I've seen the Instagram. Have you been there?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's weird because you kind of walk in an alley and there's like this sign. It has a peace sign on it. You don't know really what it is. Then you go in there and it's kind of like it's like all white. It's like everything. The walls are white. The tables are like it's just kind of an odd setup that they have in there. But it's good food.
Oh
It's
yeah.
good food. So
I've
I
heard, yeah.
mentioned that place to him,
Yeah.
and so we kind of talked about that. I talked to him about his lacrosse background. We get in
Mm.
all different topics, not only on the field but off the field as well. It's been really fun getting to know him.
How did you choose him, by the way, of all the rookies?
Well, and that's an interesting question because last year it was Rick's for me because I thought he had some character. He had a nice preseason, and I thought it would be fun to track a defensive back. And we look at the defensive backs. I thought that there was a chance that he could actually play, and
Like a
sure enough,
lot.
he had a really interesting rookie season.
Yeah.
But for Will, I always like going with a draft pick that's maybe not of the highest. Maybe they're not a first or a second rounder. Jalix Hunt would have been good, but I went with Will Shipley because in the times that he's had a chance to speak during training camp, I loved the way that he was always very upbeat and forthcoming, and he had this positive way about him. And I'm like, oh, this will be an interesting story to kind of follow his rookie season. And he has a lot of off-field interest in terms of culinary and things like that. So it's really everything ties in. We always have some very interesting conversations, and it's been really fun getting to know him. And I can't wait to. I thought we were going to have some really gold content talking about his first NFL touchdown, but
Mm.
that wasn't to be. But either way, it was still an interesting story.
So we're early in the season. We know Gainwell's clearly ahead of him because he's a guy that has been there, done that. He's in the final year of his deal, and Will's got to work his way up. But Will is also a 4th-round pick, so eventually, over the next couple of years, he's going to should have a pretty good role behind Barkley.
Yeah, he said Saquon's been helping him with pass protection. That's something that I asked him in past weeks. Trying to think. I did a really good Q&A with Tyler Steen last week. I got a chance
Yeah.
to talk to him, and he has very interesting because if he wasn't playing football, he would want to be a record producer. So I asked him
Oh.
what drew that in, like what was that inspiration, and if he made beats. And I talked to him about what it takes to be prepared to go in mid-game because he's been very effective in the games where he's had to jump in. Really, and he has a military background. Just a really fascinating story. And I always try to find a good story. They're all out there. You just got to find them.
It's interesting with Steen. The knock on him from a personnel standpoint was actually just kind of a quiet kid.
He's
So
very quiet. Yes.
right now, because you want to know with a lineman, what kind of personality it's called playing personality. What kind of personality he would have, but as you were talking about earlier, man, last year, right? This year's way different. He is so far ahead of where he was last year. So it's a pretty good story. One more thing before we move on here. And we kind of touched on it earlier in the show. There's been a rapid development of a lot of players. Let's talk about the defense because you talked about Zach Bond, right? We talked about DeJean. Who else has stood out to you? Well, actually, no, we'll include both sides of the football. There's been a lot of good last 3 weeks. Who else been on your mind who's done pretty well?
Fred Johnson. I think Fred Johnson
How
to
about
jump
that?
in there and stave off Trey Hendrickson and not allow him to wreck the game when he went into the game with 7 sacks, 15 quarterback hits. And by the way, Fred Johnson used to play for the Bengals, so he went back there and he told me in the locker room last week that it'll be an interesting test to see where I am now compared to where I was when I left. And I think he answered a lot of questions. Tyler Steen really jumped out to me. I would say on the defensive side, Nakobe Dean. Nakobe Dean was a player that I, Jeff, everyone, we were all asked about him quite a bit. I think he's really rose to the occasion. He's starting to get more comfortable. He hasn't played a lot of reps. He hasn't seen a lot of reps in his career. He's seeing that now. Quinyon Mitchell, Quinyon Mitchell, what more can you say about him? I've been most impressed with him, perhaps more than anyone. And I think that obviously Jalen Carter, nothing he does surprises me anymore because he's such a game wrecker that you almost expect it.
Let's get to Bryce Huff. What are your thoughts on him? What has happened? Why has he not progressed like the Eagles thought he would?
I think it could be perhaps overvaluing the player. Bryce Huff to me is, you see it in spurts. You see what the Eagles saw, and let's not forget, it wasn't just the Eagles that had him held in high regard in free agency. There were a lot of teams. He was looked at as the top pass rusher on the open market, or at least among the top pass rushers. So I think this is probably a player who's best suited as a rotational player. It doesn't seem like he's setting the edge particularly well or he's not doing it with regularity. And he's kind of getting, I don't want to say handled at the line of scrimmage, but there's been times where he's been able to kind of get washed out on running plays. He's also not that effective at attacking the run, but there has been some good that I've seen from him. And one thing that I will say is talking to him now compared to talking to him maybe earlier in the season, you sense a player who's playing with more confidence. I think that because he's done it and because the defense is starting to round into form, he's playing with more confidence and he's speaking like a player who knows that he can go out there and do it. It's just about doing it. I still think that he'll be okay, but he's got to get more consistent. He has to have a better plan when he's in his rushes and be more physical at the point of attack.
All right, one more for you. Nolan Smith is seemingly getting better. We talked about him before the season started, and he also got off to a slow start. What are your thoughts on his progress lately?
That's an interesting player, Adam, because one of my main takeaways for Nolan was that he needed to get better with his hand usage. He was a player who often won due to athleticism, fluidity, was able to just get around linemen. But he's starting to develop more of a pass rush repertoire. He has more violent, active hands. And again, when you start to make one play, they tend to come in bunches. You build that confidence. And for him, he's now, combining his athleticism with a much more refined technique. And I think you're seeing it manifest in a player who could very well, he has 2.5 sacks in 3 games. That's a welcome sign for a player who going into the season was heavily scrutinized and you didn't really know what to expect because he'd only played 16% of the snaps last season.
So Andrew, before we get out of here, this came up in our Patreon live stream on Wednesday. So we went around the room, so to speak, and we all kind of gave our thoughts on could this team make a run? You and I had the same exact record. We gave them an 11-6 number, which I think is very reasonable. Looks like they have a shot not only match it, but they could kind of surpass it. I think there's a chance of that. So you've now seen them, and obviously we're heading into game number 8, but they are 5-2. Where's this team at? Are they better than you thought? Are they kind of where you thought they'd be, or is it just the schedule's good, but they're getting better? Where are you at with this team?
No, they're kind of where I thought they'd be. I don't necessarily think they're better than I thought. I don't think they're worse than I thought. I kind of always envisioned this as a team that was going to be playoff bound, but maybe not necessarily Super Bowl bound. I thought that there were certain challenges on the roster they're going to have to overcome. Mainly my question going into the season, Adam, if you may remember, was the pass rush. Can they manufacture a consistent pass rush? We're still trying to find the answer to that question. But I think what you're seeing is, it's not often taken into account the team chemistry and the belief in the head coach and how they rally around. Last season, that wasn't there. This season, it's palpable. I could see it. It's there. But now it's about putting it all together on the field and obviously avoiding injuries and staying healthy. I think they will be a team that can make a deep playoff run. Now, are they a team that can contend with the Lions? We'll have to see. I think the Lions are pretty good, and I'm not sure how the Eagles quite stack up yet. I'm not so quick to crown them as the NFC favorites.
Yeah, I want to see them against the Steelers. I know the Ravens defense has been awful on the back end, but their offense has been phenomenal. I want to see them against the Washington twice, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. I know Dallas isn't that good this season, but they're always capable. We know the Eagles have not always done well at AT&T
Yeah,
Stadium,
I
right?
would expect that to be that game to me seems like a ripe spot for a loss. I mean, I would expect them to beat Jacksonville
Mm.
4 in a row. Dallas seems like a week, going down to Dallas, that has not been favorable to the Eagles in
Yep.
the past. That's a tough spot.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, great job, my friend. So next time we will be on the air for the pregame show this weekend. Myself, Jeff Mosher, and Greg Cosell. We look forward to getting that to you and breaking down everything. And make sure you check out Andrew's work at InsideTheBirds.com. And also, Andrew, you're also on the Fanatic. When could the people here in 97.5 the Fanatic?
Friday night from 6 to 7, I'll be solo hosting a Birds Insider
Ooh,
Report show. I'll be
cool.
on the Kincaid and South Tunis Friday morning from 8 to 9 in studio, and on Best Show Ever later in the day at 5:25 for a
Wow.
segment.
Nice, man. Nice, nice. All right, for Andrew DiCecco, I'm Adam Caplan. We'll see you on the next one.
Be sure to check out our friends at phlsportsnation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at phlsportsnation.com and on Twitter at phlsportsnation.